Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this session. We're really excited to really cover a topic that hits home for many organizations today, which is technology overload. And together, we'll talk more about how to conquer and overcome technology overload. With me today, we have Dr. Rebecca Hines from Asana. You lead the Work Innovation Lab at Asana. Welcome, Rebecca. Thanks for joining us.
Freddy, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here with you and everyone here to talk about tech overload and how we can solve it. Tech overload is a feeling that we all know all too well. It's that feeling of drowning in too many notifications, too many technologies, and seemingly endless digital distractions.
Well, before we get into technology overload, would you mind giving us an overview of Asana and the mission and the research that you lead at the Work Innovation Lab?
Absolutely. So Asana is a leading AI-first enterprise work management platform that helps teams work smarter together and make better decisions. And the Work Innovation Lab is Asana's think tank that conducts original research to help executives meet the growing changes and challenges of work. It was really founded on the premise that work today is so complex, it's so dynamic, that executives need more research, more data, and more insight to be able to effectively solve their most pressing challenges.
Like, for example, balancing technology overload and this broad application stack with actual employee productivity.
Exactly. And when we think about the future of work, we think a lot about technology. But technology by itself doesn't automatically make organizations more productive or more collaborative. In fact, we're using so many different technologies today, it's sometimes hard to know what work to do in which technology. And that's really a breeding ground for this tech overload. Employees use so many different tools today to collaborate. They're becoming overwhelmed and exhausted rather than productive and energized.
Exactly. And we've seen this, how a broad application stack, we've heard many of our panelists today, Dilip covered this, and David as well, that one of the consequences of technology overload can really lead to major disruptions to employee productivity, which often translates into data silos creating across multiple applications. And one of the impact of data silos is ultimately leading to a big drain on productivity, and our users have to interact across all these applications and context switch continuously without necessarily being best at their job. And all of these effectively impacting business operations, ultimately the bottom line for companies.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's a big problem. So how do we solve tech overload? In theory, the answer is simple. If we're using too many technologies, why not just get rid of some? But it's much more complex than that. And research shows that employees often prefer to use purpose-built tools designed for their specific job function rather than one-size-fits-all solutions. And so there's a tension. If employees want to use different specialized tools to get their work done, you can't just eliminate them. The employees will fight back and their productivity will suffer as well.
That's absolutely right. And I think historical organizations have tried to tackle and solve for this problem by really looking at how can we create these point-to-point integrations across multiple apps. And it becomes extremely difficult to not only research, build, and expensive, but it doesn't stop there. Once you've built these integrations, then you need to maintain and for however long these applications actually end up living in the application stack of companies and organizations today. And the other piece is, with a very broad application stack, then it becomes challenging to really understand in the world where the new digital workflow is so cross-functional in nature, or how do we enable our employees to be best at their job. And one of the reasons why we decided to partner on this joint study together was really to understand how can we co-innovate and how can we think about enabling employees to do their best. And so we come up with a research study which we call the collaboration cleanse.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And AWS and Asana were really natural partners for this experiment. Like AWS, Asana and the Work Innovation Lab believe in the power of collaboration, both when it comes to the research we do and how we do it, as well as the technologies we use. They're just better together. But it's not as simple as just investing in new technologies. Businesses and you as leaders need to be intentional about the technologies that you bring into your organization and how they impact your employees. I sometimes like to think about new technologies like new employees. They need to be selected carefully and they need to be integrated well, or else they can derail your entire company. So with our joint study, which we also conducted with Stanford professor Bob Sutton and UC Santa Barbara professor Paul Leonardi, we really wanted to understand tech overload and, more importantly, how organizations can help their employees do their best and most productive work.
So let's get into the study. So what we did was we sourced participants from Amazon and Asana. We had about 58 participants, which we divided into 2 groups. And the first group, we asked them to halve their technology stack for 2 weeks. And the second group, we asked them to reduce or subtract as many or as few applications they deemed necessary to be as productive as possible as part of their job. And I think we had some interesting insights from the research.
Yes, and the design of the experiment was really inspired by one of our research partners, Professor Bob Sutton, who's done a lot of research on the power of subtraction in the workplace. As humans, we're naturally inclined to add things like processes, workflows, technologies, meetings. We're much more inclined to add these things to our work rather than subtract them. As Professor Sutton says, humans and executives in particular often suffer from addition sickness. But what's really interesting is that even though we're hardwired for addition, research shows that when we're primed to subtract, it really is powerful in getting us into what we call a subtraction mindset. And so that's why we explicitly asked all our participants to subtract tools from their tech stack. We wanted to get them into this mindset and think more critically about which tools they could eliminate.
Well, I think as part of the study, we also measure what we call digital exhaustion. I think this is a term that's coined by Professor Leonardi. And digital exhaustion is really defined as a condition in which people really experiment physical, social, and emotional fatigue as a result of using multiple technologies across their day. And I think one of the most interesting results that we found that counterintuitively, as individuals subtracted tools, actually their digital exhaustion increased. And I think the average participants reported on average an increase of about 10% of their digital exhaustion, irrespective of whether they halved their tool stack or in some cases they didn't even have any tool stack removed from their application. So what do we actually make of that conclusion?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And initially we predicted that tech exhaustion would go down, digital exhaustion would go down as the study progressed because people were using fewer technologies. But as Fedi mentioned, we saw the opposite. And as our participants cleansed their tech stack, they became more aware of just how exhausting tech overload is. So they became more exhausted as they became more aware of just how many disconnected, dysfunctional, and duplicative tools they were using at work. So they became more aware as well of the time they were wasting context switching from app to app to app, from Slack notifications to text messages to email to Asana tasks to Fig Jamboards and much more. And so not only did they become more aware of the sheer number of tools they were using at work, they also became more aware that it was crushing their productivity. And so the study really helped participants be more mindful of the cost of technology overload. We saw that 41% of our participants described this boost in mindfulness throughout the study, and they described it on their own without any prompting.
And I think we have some great quotes here. Some of the participants really emphasize that they felt that there is a significant loss that comes from context switching across multiple applications. I think a second participant was actually surprised by how much of their core job really revolved around 2 or 3 core applications, and I think they defined everything else as just noise. That was a bit annoying. And I think that the third participant is actually one of my favorite quotes here. And it's very much around being thoughtful and more cognizant about the technologies that this person used. And the sense of awareness and of questioning, why do I need to interact with this specific piece of software? And how do I feel about that interaction? And so with that in mind, I think we can jump into, some of the other findings on this study that help us tie it all together.
Definitely. And as we analyzed the data, we were really pleased to see that most of our participants said they would make long-lasting changes to their tech habits as a result of this study. In fact, more than half of our participants said they plan to use one or more fewer technologies after the experiment as compared to before. But our participants also told us that they couldn't fully optimize their tech stack. So there were technologies that they wanted to stop using, but felt they couldn't. And this goes back to the idea of digital exhaustion. Employees wanted to eliminate the tools that wore them out, but many felt like they didn't have the autonomy to do so. They didn't have the autonomy to stop using these tools because they couldn't force other people to stop using them as well. And so this realization that they couldn't do anything to really target the source of their digital exhaustion was a big reason why they felt so exhausted.
And I think we have a term for this.
We do, and what we saw was the number one reason why people felt like they couldn't eliminate tools was because other people expected them to use these tools. Sometimes it was a manager, sometimes it was a team member, sometimes it was a cross-functional team member, sometimes a customer. And in the research, there's a term for this called learned helplessness. And it's the idea that people can be conditioned to believe that a bad situation is inescapable or unchangeable. So our employees wanted to use fewer tools, but they felt handcuffed, and they told us they were frustrated. They were now really aware of the cost of tech overload on their work, but they couldn't do much to eliminate the tools because their technology was so interdependent on other people.
And companies, as we think about the cross-functional engagement and teams, and how do we need to bring HR with finance, with marketing, with sales, product together to execute on a business process, it becomes really difficult on how employees can't just eliminate tools, even if they find them difficult to use or interact with. And so I think one of the aspects that we've realized as we think about, again, the modern digital workflow is as organizations, so typical organizations can have north of 10,000 plus business processes, and many of these are cross-functional in nature, then it becomes almost expected to have more and more tools in this environment. And so I guess all these results are very interesting. How can we translate this for our audience, and what are some of the main takeaways that you think can help us conquer this tech overload?
And I think there are several key learnings from this study. The first is to really be thoughtful about the technologies you use. To be successful, organizations need to continuously evaluate their tech stack. When you purchase or download technology, it's not meant to be a life sentence. Just because something was once useful or seemed to be useful doesn't mean it still is. As companies grow and evolve, we know that they need to change their tech stack with them, and we're seeing that very clearly right now with AI.
And it's not just companies that evolve, technologies evolve. I mean, you made the example of artificial intelligence. A few years ago, many companies were talking about artificial intelligence, something that would plan for the future. We're now in a reality where there are new intelligent capabilities being deployed almost on a daily basis. And so it really puts into perspective how in order for employees to get the most out of these experiences, you really need to unlock the value that comes from the underlying data sets. And so data has to be the foundation upon which companies can build their AI strategies and ultimately unlocking data that it's cross-siloed across different applications becomes critical.
Definitely, and I think that brings us really nicely to our next recommendation, which is integrations. Integrations bring your data and tools together. No matter what apps you use, integrations allow you to collaborate and share information, and that really means fewer silos. Plus, when technologies are connected, it limits this context switching, or what we sometimes call the toggle tax of switching between too many different technologies.
To ultimately enable, I think, what Alex mentioned as deep work, right? Really focusing and concentrating on your day-to-day. I think we're going to see more later in the day with Alex, the Chief Product Officer of Asana, together with Alex Dunlap, the Vice President for Business Technology at AWS, unpack this topic a little bit more in terms of how can you use AWS AppFabric to ultimately unlock net new intelligent experiences for users. But if we go back to the study for a moment and we think about what actually happened, I think we also observed that participants really tried to do whatever they could to stay in their tool of choice. And one of the dynamics that we saw we had a number of participants that double the use of integrations. And not only that, I think there is the other piece of it was that participants also were very vocal about we're going to be a lot more deliberate in terms of what app do we choose, right? And so I think we have some interesting quotes to share as well. Let's see if we can. I think I'll be more intentional. The fact that there is a lot more awareness and mindfulness around the impact that the broad tech stack is having on participants was very interesting insight. And I think as we think about our participants and really looking to consolidate, we also saw that the usage of Asana increased. And it really speaks to the value that can come out of getting tools that are not really designed to work together, to actually work better together.
And there's really interesting research around this context switching cost. And many executives I find don't realize the crippling app switching cost that exists for their employees. But the data is shocking. Research has shown that employees can toggle between apps 1,200 times per day. And if they become distracted as they toggle, which is often the case, it can take them up to 20 minutes or more to return back to their original task. And so it's an enormous cost to the employee to be toggling through different apps every day. Integrations are incredibly valuable, and that's why we're so excited about AWS AppFabric. We know that teams need specialized tools to collaborate and thrive, and consolidation on one tool just doesn't make sense. So the bottom line is it's not about finding one tool that works for all your employees. That's not possible or productive. It's really about finding the right set of tools that work well together and enable your employees to do their best and most important work.
And I couldn't have said it in better. With AWS AppFabric, we're really looking at abstracting away this integration layer and taking away this complexity for customers and end users alike so that they can really focus on their deep work in their tool of choice, unlocking experiences that really span across the entire application stack that their teams are involved with so that they can actually be better at their job. Well, we hope that we've inspired this research. And Rebecca, thank you so much for your leadership in the study and participating with us today. What's next for the collaboration client study? What can the audience and our virtual audience as well, where it can go to find out more?
Thank you. So we'll have a full playbook and report later this summer that we'll send to everyone here today. And in the meantime, you can check out some of our research at the Work Innovation Lab. And we encourage you all to transform the way you work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. So I think we'll open the floor for some questions.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Federico. And thank you, Rebecca. I never realized I switched between apps that often. That's kind of crazy. That research is great. So some people have been wondering, you mentioned it, touched on a little bit, what's next for the research with AWS and Asana? Are you thinking of extending this research to different participants, more people?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So I think we're both really excited about expanding the research. I think we're very much seeing this as study one of a long line of studies. One of the topics that I know Fedi and I are both interested in is the idea that different people use technologies differently, and how can we predict the technology usage patterns of high performers? Do high performers in your organization use technology in different ways? Do they wake up and the first thing they do is go to their inbox? Do they structure meeting time? How do they interact with these technologies all day long? And can we discern some best practices to share with all employees?
Absolutely, and it ties back into one of the core tenets that David touched upon earlier, being user-centric. And so we do want to meet the users where they are, and we want to unlock whatever experience makes most sense for them in terms of how they interact with the tool of choice.
Awesome. And so we have one more question coming in. How do you think about your research as companies focus on driving efficiencies? Do you see an opportunity to impact employee engagement through this kind of work and improve those efficiencies somehow?
So this particular study was very much focused on efficiency and productivity. We measured app usage and integration usage. I think a natural next step is to look at the employee experience. We know that more than ever before, employees are conscious of the technologies they're using every day. If they're needing to log into 10 different technologies each day, that's going to impact the employee experience. And so I think that's an area that we're both really passionate about exploring next.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Federico and Rebecca. Thank you for coming up. We appreciate it.